Okay, so we get to start a new parak today. It's the last parak of Nazir. Right? Daf Samach Aleph.
Yeah.
Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. We should have Beis Hamikdash immediately. Okay. So it's a new Mishnah. New parak. Akutim. It says over here Akuti, but it really means a non-Jew. Any non-Jew. It's not. It was adjusted by the censor. It said Akum or Nachri or something, and they adjusted it to Kuti. Kuti ein lem Naziris. A non-Jew doesn't have Naziris. They can't become a Nazir. You know, even if they take the vow of Naziris, they could still drink wine and they don't have to bring the sacrifices afterwards. Nashim va'avadim yesh lem Naziris. On the other hand, women and slaves, they do have Naziris. Chimer ben nashim mi ba'avadim. We have the Mishnah here says that there's a stringency of women over the slaves. In the Mishnah later on, we're going to have the stringency of the slaves over the women. So it's going to give us both ways. But first, the stringency of the women over the slaves is that a master can force his slave not to take the vow of Naziris or to violate the vow of Naziris. He can force his slave to violate the vow to drink wine. But he can't force his wife. Can't force his wife to violate the vow. He can annul the vow, do hafara, but he can't force her to eat or to drink wine or to become tamid. Okay, that has to do with the ownership that the master has over his slave, that he can control that. Okay, Ketani, we learned in the Mishnah, Hakutim ein lem Naziris. The non-Jew doesn't have Naziris. Okay.
I'm sorry, because I actually the shit. I don't understand how you can tell somebody from another religion that they can't do something. They can do whatever they want. They don't believe in what we believe. They say, I want to be a Nazir. So
right.
We say, well, we just say we don't accept it. What is this whole concept?
They don't have the laws that they're required to bring the sacrifices. They're not going to drink wine. That's their business. And you want to come to the temple and to bring the sacrifices.
So we say, yeah, this is not acceptable. We don't have the passes for this.
Right. And also, the Jewish religion has what to say about everyone else in the world as well. Even if they're not a religion, we have rules of what they're obligated in. So one of these things is that they're not obligated in if they take on a Nazir. Yeah, it's the reason why we can do that is because we hold that not everyone needs to be Jewish, and nevertheless they have rules for them. Okay, so the question is Minani Mili. Where do we know that a non-Jew doesn't have the rules of Naziris? So the Tanur Rabbana was taught in a brisa, important brisa. Darbel b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, and the pasuk says, Isha Yisha Kiafli Linder Neder Nazir Lahazel Hashem. The laws of Naziris. It says it starts off, speak to the Jewish people. Obviously not to the non-Jews. But Marta Alayim, you should say to them, what does it mean say to them? You already said speak to them. Well, you should say to them, that's coming to include the Rabbi says Avadim, that a slave can become a Nazir, a non-Jew now cannot become a Nazir. We have it all. Gemara asks, what is that? So the Gemara says, Lama likra, why do I need a pasuk to include slaves, that their slave can become a Nazir? Now a slave is really Haman Samachala, the new parak. A slave has all the obligations, Torah obligations that a woman has. So you don't need a pasuk to say, I don't need a special pasuk always to include a woman in every law. And I don't need a pasuk to include a slave. It's automatic, unless I have an exclusion. So the Gemara says, why do you need a pasuk to include slaves? And I don't need a pasuk to include women in laws of the Torah. I have certain mitzvahs that women aren't obligated in, but that's because they're excluded from it. But every other mitzvah in the Torah, they're obligated. And so therefore the slave is also obligated. So why do I need a pasuk to tell me that a slave is included in the laws of Nazirus? Amarava, Rava says, it's not so simple. Shani hacha, over here it's different. Amakra lesser Israel nafshai, because he takes a prohibition. I think this is not by the, I think this is by a regular vow. This is not by Nazirus. To take a vow on himself, to make a prohibition on his soul. He says he takes a prohibition on his soul. We're only referring to someone that his soul is in his control, is under his ownership. But since the slave does not have control over his life because he's owned by the master. Maybe he can't become a Nazir. Mashmalan comes to teach me that yes, he can become a Nazir. In other words, the question was, the slave can become a Nazir, that we know. We have a special pasuk for that. The question is, why do I need that pasuk? The answer is because I could have thought that maybe he doesn't have control over his life to be able to take on that vow. The pasuk tells me that he does have that sort of control and he can take that on. He can become a Nazir. Special pasuk that teaches me that. Okay.
So he does have control over his life.
He doesn't have control over his life, but he's able to take on the Nazirus. Even though usually something like that you would have to have control over.
Right.
But pasuk b'amart aleim comes to include a slave, that a slave is allowed to, even though he doesn't control his life.
Is there a reason for that? That all these other
And possibly wait for the next page. Possibly we'll have
wow.
what's wrong? 61a. Okay, Amar Mar. The following Gemara is going to take us about a page, 2.5 pages to get through. So it's good we're doing this on a Sunday because we can get that in, the whole thing. Amar Mar, the master taught, Dabral b'nei Yisrael v'lo lev kechavim. Speak to the Jewish people and not to the non-Jews. We mentioned that a non-Jew cannot become a Nazir. Where do we know that from? Because the pasuk starts off by Nazirus. It says, speak to the Jewish people. Jewish people means only Jewish people. Gemara says, really? Whenever it says Yisrael, that means that a non-Jew isn't included? But that's not so. We have a source, Vitanya, Gabe Erechin, the Ksiv Dabral b'nei Yisrael. When it comes to taking the value of a person and donating it to the temple, a person can say, I'm giving the erech, the value of so-and-so to the temple. So it says in that chapter, it says, Dabral b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, and it gives you what a person's value is there, if it's based on their age. A man at this age, a woman at this age. Betanya in the Brisa says, B'nei Yisrael marichan ve'nevid kav marichan. Well, so far so good. The Jewish people can take the value and promise to give it, or pledge to give it, but a non-Jew can't pledge to give the value. Maybe a non-Jew also can't be the person that's being evaluated. Ish. Pasuk says Ish. Now Ish teaches me that it's not only a Jew, it teaches me even if it's a non-Jew. So the Gemara's question here is like this. By Nazirus, it uses the word Ish. I know it says Dabra b'nei Yisrael, but it says Isha Isha. There's a man. A man by Erechin is including a non-Jew as well. So over here also, it should include the non-Jew. So why are you telling me that a non-Jew can't be a Nazir if it says Ish, and I know for Ish from Erechin that it means a non-Jew? You'll say, so why does it say B'nai Yisrael? I don't know, we'll have to figure that out. But meanwhile, it says Ish. The Gemara says, Shani Hacha Damakra, another source that's going to teach me that a non-Jew cannot become a Nazir, because it says, The Nazir is not allowed to become impure to his father or to his mother. That means to their funerals. He cannot make himself contaminated. Now, it would only be applicable to someone that this law would apply. The Mishiyesh Layav, that's only referring to someone that would have a father, which is referring to a Jew. Yatzavid Kechavim Shein Layav, a non-Jew doesn't have a father. Gemara says, what are you talking about? Lamai, what do you mean a non-Jew doesn't have a father? Do you mean that for inheritance that a non-Jew doesn't inherit his father? That's not so. Amar Rab Chia bar Rav and Amar Rab Yechanan. A non-Jew inherits his father according to the Torah. Of course, he has a father for inheritance. It says an inheritance I have given Mount Seir, which means that non-Jews have inheritance. How does inheritance work? It goes from father to son. Do you see? Non-Jews have a father. So what are you telling me stories about that a non-Jew can't have Nazirus because he doesn't have a father? It's so not accurate. Means a father. A non-Jew doesn't have a father. It wasn't talking about inheritance. It was talking about that he's not obligated to honor the father. Gemara says, what does that have to do with Nazirus? Right. Miksiv kabid avicha gabi nazir. What are you going to say? That a non-Jew doesn't have a bris or something, so therefore he doesn't have. It has nothing to do with nazir, right? If you want to tell me that he doesn't go to contaminate himself to his father anyway because he doesn't have a, okay. But the fact is he has a father. He inherits from the father, and what does that have to do with kibbud av if he has to serve him water, or something, or help him get dressed? Ela Makra, the pasuk says, "Lavavi melayitama, misheyesh leitama," talking about someone that could become tamei, and the Nazir is not allowed to become tamei to his parents, even to his parents. So since a non-Jew doesn't have the laws of tama, a non-Jew never becomes tamei. Yatzavid Kechavim Shein Leitama. So that's why the non-Jew doesn't have the laws of Nazirus. In other words, problem is it says the pasuk ish, which would include the non-Jew. So it says that no, since he doesn't have tumah, so it excludes him.
Oh, the boy doesn't have this concept of tumah.
But that's what we're saying right now. And why are we mentioning this?
Yeah.
That a non-Jew doesn't become tummy. Only a Jew becomes tummy.
What's the connection with this tummy thing with the father and all this?
So what we wanted to say was that a non-Jew doesn't have the laws of Nazirus. Tries to become a Nazir.
Right.
Say that he did nothing. So we said, but 1 second, it says in the pasuk ish,
Yeah.
that includes a non-Jew. So we said that, but we have another exclusion because the Nazir doesn't become contaminated to his father or his mother. So that must be that we're not talking about a non-Jew, because a non-Jew anyways doesn't have any issue of being contaminated to the father or the mother. So we said, what does that mean? So we said, first, maybe it means that he doesn't have a father.
But
There's
how
no
would
such
someone
concept.
if just their parents
The
Tommy,
parent,
yeah.
no, the parents passed away.
that's why
He doesn't go to their funeral. So we're saying that since that issue doesn't apply to a non-Jew, so therefore the whole Nazirus doesn't apply to the non-Jew. He said, what does it mean that doesn't apply to the non-Jew? It doesn't mean that he doesn't have a father. Non-Jews have a father that even inherits from the father. Maybe it means he doesn't have to honor his father. We said, what does that have to do with anything? So we said, what it means is that he doesn't have any laws of contamination.
Yeah.
Not the father, it's the contamination.
Mhm.
A non-Jew goes to a cemetery, he doesn't become tummy.
Yeah.
Only a Jew becomes tummy.
Non-Jew convert to Judaism at the same moment becoming a Nazir. That not exist.
Simultaneous, becomes a Jewish Nazir.
He says, yeah, I'd like to become a Jewish Nazir.
Technically, he becomes Jewish when he puts his head in the water, comes up. I guess right when he comes up, he can say, I'm a Nazir. But it's not simultaneous.
So
Actually,
today, I'm just curious. Whenever someone goes to a funeral, they're coming, regardless of how far away they are from the coffin.
No. They have to come within 4 cubits of the coffin. They actually have to touch the coffin. to touch, they have to touch the body.
I haven't been to a funeral in a long time.
Yeah,
Is
but
that something that's
no,
done? I understand.
there's no significance to it today, being tummy or not,
Yeah,
because everyone's tummy.
but Kohanim, what's,
Only the significance would be that a Kohen doesn't go.
Go ahead, what?
Kohen doesn't go to a funeral at all.
his immediate family.
Only the immediate family.
I don't get it. So if a non-Kohen, Tame doesn't apply. You said it become Tame, but so what?
Yeah.
But a
It would
Kohen-
only be relevant to temple time,
So why is the Kohen prohibited from going into the temple?
because the Kohen has the rules of Tumah that are still relevant.
That are relevant.
Yeah. The rest of us don't have it.
How does he
So-
get by accident? If he does it, how does he contaminated?
You don't have the red heifer.
Does he suffer any consequences?
I don't know. This is
Yeah. Okay.
okay. Minalan.
Whites. Let's see the way that you can have it.
Can they still give the,
No.
what's it called, the Kabbalah's, name or the priestly blessing? They can still do
The only way a Kohen would not be allowed to do the blessings would be
They have to watch
if
their.
if he married someone that he wasn't allowed to, or if he committed some like major sin that maybe killed someone or something, then they don't do the duchening. Otherwise, he does. So now the Gemara on top of Samach Aleph on the base says, "Minalan leslu tuma." How do you know that a non-Jew doesn't have the loss of tuma? The Makra pasuk says, "Bishasher yitama." Does it say yitma or yitama? Bishasher. Bishasher yitma. Bishasher yitma. When a man will become tamei, will not become pure, and he'll enter into the temple. His soul will be cut off. If he goes into the temple, anyone that goes into the temple while they're impure. So the mishesh lekal, that's only, we're on 61b. That's only someone that has a congregation. But yatzazeh shein lekal, but the non-Jew doesn't have a congregation. We said he gets cut off from the congregation. The non-Jew doesn't have the congregation. So obviously the laws of impurity don't apply to him. Because in the section that speaks about impurity, if he gets cut off from the congregation, it's not referring. Obviously not. Yeah, obviously it's not referring to him. Mimai, how do you know this? You know, you're jumping to conclusions here. You say because he doesn't have a congregation, that means he doesn't become impure. Maybe that's totally not true. Maybe he does become impure. He just doesn't have karis. He doesn't get cut off from the congregation because he doesn't have the congregation, but he still becomes tamei.
They go to the base of Mikdash inside the courtyard and everything.
It was the section that they were allowed to go into. Amar Kra, the pasuk says, "Behiza hatar al tamei." The pure one will sprinkle the water onto the impure one. So how does that work? Kol sheyesh leitar yesh leituma. We say that anyone that has purity can also have impurity. Kol shein leitar ein leituma. Anyone that doesn't have purity doesn't have impurity, which means that the non-Jew doesn't have purity, therefore they don't have impurity either. We know we have sources that say that another pasuk, I forget what the pasuk is, but says that you can only sprinkle the water of the paraduma onto a Jew. Where did I see the pasuk? This will be for the congregation of the Jewish people as a remembrance. So it's only a remembrance for the Jewish people. Based on that, we know that the paraduma, the red heifer, is only sprinkled on the Jewish person. So now we're saying that only someone that can have the water sprinkled on him would be someone that will also become impure. Therefore, a non-Jew never becomes impure. It's only a Jew that becomes impure. Okay. The Ema, let's say, maybe that's not so. Maybe granted. There's a pasuk that says L'mishmeres B'nai Yisrael, that the water of the paraduma is only for the Jewish people. Granted, but it means that that the non-Jew can never become pure. Maybe still becomes impure. We've been challenging this concept a few times already. Amar Kra, you see Aleph Kuf, you have Aleph Kuf. Amar Kra v'isha sheyitma v'lo yischata. We're talking about someone that becomes tamei and doesn't become pure. That means that it's obviously someone that's able to become pure. It's only someone that could have become pure, that would have the issue of becoming impure. Since a non-Jew can never become pure, also he can't become impure. It's very interesting.
I mean, it says, Daber of Israel, so it's only referring to Am Yisrael. So
We're
is
talking
that
about Nazirus.
inclusive?
The
No,
Nazir.
that's for Nazir.
Yeah. But then we said that that's not so clear because it says Ish. And Ish by Erechin included more than just the Bnei Yisrael. By Erechin it also said Ish means a man, but that's referring to even a non-Jew. Yeah. What does it say in the Megillah? It says, does it say Idal? Is it called when Gemara says Kirtzain Ish v'Ish, that the drinking of the wine was according to the will of each man? Gemara says the will of Mardechai and the will of Haman. So Haman was called the Ish as well in the Megillah. Ish. Does it say the word Ish? By Haman, somewhere it says Ish, that Haman, it says Ish. Remember? Oh, Ish Tsar V'Ayiv, that's where it says Ish Tsar V'Ayiv. That means that he would say Ish. So basically the term Ish could also be used for non-Jews. That's our question. So therefore, why is Nazirus only applicable to Jews? It says by Nazirus the word Ish. It says Isha Yisha. And now we're saying that because they don't become impure, and the laws of Nazirus specifies, it's clear that it has to do with impurity and impurity. And since the non-Jew doesn't have that anyway, so he doesn't have the laws of Nazirus. Seems to be an answer. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar, Rav Acha bar Yaakov gives a different answer. Remember we mentioned about Tumah. Do they have Tumah or not? Well, it turns out that if someone owns a slave, the slave is passed on to his children when he passes away. It's the slave is they get transferred through inheritance. But that's only, Gemara says, Kol sheyesh li nachla yesh li tumah.
Does a slave get freed at the Yovel year?
A Jewish slave goes out by the Shemitah year and by the Yovel. But a non-Jewish slave doesn't go out. Here we're talking about a non-Jewish slave. So these get passed on through inheritance. Now, how did we get to Kol sheyesh li nachla yesh li tumah v'chil she'en li nachla ein li tumah?
Shemitah year, October.
Non-Jew doesn't own the slave the same way a Jew would own the slave. The Jew owns the slave like he owns his body. He actually acquires him. He owns him. The non-Jew also has slaves, but he only owns the service that he does. He doesn't actually own him as property. So therefore, the non-Jew doesn't bequeath the slave to his inheritance, to his children. Well, I'm not seeing how this is associated with Tumah. So we said that here was our issue. We said that a non-Jew doesn't have a father. So what are you talking about? He doesn't have a father. Yochanan says clearly that a non-Jew inherits his father Dvar Torah. So even biblically, not the inheritance of the father goes to the son by a non-Jew. They said no, not 100%, because he doesn't inherit the slave. He doesn't inherit the slave. Then back to this that he doesn't really have the father. So when it comes to la'ava v'li'imei la'yatama, that he shouldn't become a nazir is not supposed to become tummy to his father. Well, the non-Jew doesn't have the father anyway. See, because he doesn't inherit the slaves like a Jew would. Okay. Gemara says, if that's the case, ihachi avadim namilai. Okay, if you just got rid of a non-Jew from becoming a Nazir because he said that they don't own a slave to pass him on, and therefore they don't have to become contaminated to the father because they don't really have the father because they don't inherit slaves. If that's the case, then a slave, you told us, does have the laws of Naziris. Even a non-Jewish slave can become a Nazir. Only a regular non-Jew that can't become a Nazir. A non-Jewish slave can, yes, become a Nazir. But if the whole issue of the non-Jew was that they don't bequeath slaves from one generation to the next, well, a slave for sure doesn't do that. Ela Marava, so Rava has to come in and adjust what happened there. How do we have this whole problem in the first place? Because by Yerechin we said, it says Daber al Bnei Yisrael, but it also said Yesh. So even though a Jewish person is the only one that can make the evaluation, right, to donate it, but the non-Jew could still be the one that's being evaluated. If that's the case, we think that maybe a Nazir should also, the Nazir should also be able to be a non-Jew, because it says Ish by a Nazir. Amar Elam Rava, Rava says, one second. Bishleim Magabi Yerchen. When it comes to Erchen, Shnemar Bnei Yisrael, it says over there the Jewish people. Bnei Yisrael Marichen Meinayv Dikam Marichen. Only a Jewish person is allowed to donate that the value of another person. The non-Jew doesn't take that pledge.
The whole idea of being a Nazir and the idea of owning slaves to find out if a Gentile can become a.
That's how we, yeah, that's what we were doing. Or ultimately, if the Gentile could become a Nazir.
Oh, okay.
So, maybe the non-Jew also can't be evaluated that someone else will pledge his value. So Talmud Leimar Ish, it says Ish. But Hacha, over here when it comes to a Nazir, what are you going to say? Bnei Yisrael Nazrim Mivim Karban. A Jewish person becomes a Nazir, and when the Naziris is over, then they bring the sacrifice. But a non-Jew not, right? That's what we would say. I get it that they can't bring the sacrifice. But maybe what you want to tell me is that a non-Jew can't become a Nazir at all, that even if he says he's not going to drink wine and let his hair grow, it doesn't count. Talmud Leimar Ish. The pasuk would say, it says Ish, that tells me no, that a non-Jew can become a Nazir. This is what you want to say. This is Rava's spelling it out, but now he's about to reject it. Amri, but we'll say about that, Imishim Karban. Basically, all you gained by Daber al Bnei Yisrael was that the non-Jew doesn't bring the sacrifice. But when it comes to Naziris, he can still be a Nazir. He's a Nazir without the sacrifice. If that's the case, so then all you did was remove the carbon from the non-Jew. But we don't have Bnei Yisrael teaching me that it's only the Jewish person brings the carbon. Elamei Hasam, I have another place. It says La'ila Pratlan Naziris to Rabbi Yisrael Glili. I have another source that says that a non-Jew is not allowed to bring the carbon of a Nazir. So if you're going to tell me that Bnei Yisrael excludes the non-Jew from the carbonis of the Nazir, that I learned from La'ila in Parshas Emor. That's a totally different source. So obviously I don't need this. So basically what Rabbi just told me is that the comparison that we just did to Erechin is totally not, it doesn't match at all. By Erechin we said that the Jew is allowed to pledge the value. The non-Jew could be the one that's being pledged, but not pledged. When it comes to Naziris, if you're going to try to tell me that the Jew is allowed to become a Nazir and bring the sacrifice, the non-Jew is allowed to be a Nazir, but without the sacrifice, that I don't get from Bnei Yisrael and then Ish. So therefore I can't compare it to the Arab.
Yeah, I mean, I would
It just
also
knocks off the question.
that if a goy can be a Nazir, what repercussion is there if he violates that pledge? What is it, a malchus or
Right.
something? Like,
Right.
what a goy?
Right.
I don't.
Right. But if the 7
Not
Noachide
held to
laws, if he lives in Israel and he's obligated to keep the 7 Noachide laws and also whatever Torah laws are applicable to him, so then if he violates, it's going to be quite serious. Ema, the Gemara says, I can try this again. I still can get out of this how there's a Bnei Yisrael, there's a specific law that's only applicable to Jews, and then I'll have Ish, some sort of Naziris that will still be applicable to a non-Jew. I can still try this. Maybe only a Jewish person could be a Nazir forever, but a non-Jew could only be a regular Nazir, but not a Nazir forever. Maybe we'll say that, and that will be Dabra Bnei Yisrael, that you could be a Nazir forever. And then it says Ish, that would be including the non-Jew, that, and maybe even the carbon he won't bring because I have another pasuk for that. But maybe it could at least be a regular Nazir. So, and that's what we learn from Ish. So Yachalay Nazir, maybe they shouldn't be a Nazir at all. Ish. Ish tells me that he can become a regular Nazir. When it says Dabra Bnei Yisrael, was it talking about a Nazir forever? It wasn't talking about, it was talking about a regular Nazir. So if that's the case, then Dabra Bnei Yisrael is only a regular Nazir. What's Ish going to be including? If a non-Jew can't be a regular Nazir, then Ish can't tell me that he can be. Well, Eima Bnei Yisrael Madir Bnei and Benazir Vein Hayvdicha Madir Bnei and Benazir. Remember we said that a father can pledge, can take a vow for his son, that his son is going to be a Nazir. He said that. He can make his son into a Nazir by taking a vow that his son is going to be a Nazir. So he said maybe only a Jewish person can take a pledge like that, but a non-Jewish person can't take a pledge like that. Very good. Dabra Bnei Yisrael. Maybe that a non-Jew can't be a Nazir at all. That a non-Jew can become a Nazir. The only thing that the non-Jew is excluded from is that he can't take the pledge for his son. Gemara says, nice try, but in between the lines. They said this guy from Europe, he was a Rosh Hashiva in University. His name was Palachik. Shlomo Palachik was they called him the Eloi Mimaitze. Anyway, in his sefer over there, it says that every day he didn't speak English at all, but he said they read the paper. They would read the paper. So he said, "You don't know what it says in the paper. Like, what are you reading the paper?" So he said, "Look, in Russia, they didn't write the news. So you have to learn how to read between the lines." So he said, "I don't read English, but I can still read between the lines." Anyway, so between the lines it says, "Nice try." Got it. So 1 second, you can't do that because Amar Rabbi Yochanan halachi ben Nazir. It's a halacha by Nazir that a father can take the vow for his son. Now, what does it mean halachi ben Nazir? That means that it's halacha l'meish misinai. So you were trying to tell me that the pasuk of Ish is telling me this, and Bnei Yisrael is teaching me that. It's all not accurate, because the fact that a father can make his son into a Nazir is a tradition from Moshe, and it doesn't have anything to do with psukim. You can't mix the psukim in to tell me that what it's teaching me. That's one approach to this. Ema Bnei Yisrael Magalchan al Nazir Saviyim Ve'Noivid Kav Magalchan Nazir Saviyim. We're trying to take like a certain specific law of Nazir and say that it's only applicable to a Jew, and then we'll say, but really a non-Jew could become a regular Nazir. It's just this one law that he can't have. That's what we're attempting to do. We will get the Bnei Yisrael in there and the Ish. So he said maybe when a father passes away and the son was a Nazir and the father was a Nazir, that the son can take the father's sacrifices, the value, the money that he had designated for the sacrifices and use them. That was the halacha that we had. Maybe that's only by a Jew, but not by a non-Jew. Right? Dabral b'nei Yisrael, it only applies to a Jew. Now we're on top of Samach Beis. Yachal layu nazirim. Maybe that a non-Jew can't be a Nazir at all. Talmud Marish, a non-Jew can become a Nazir. It's only that one law that isn't applicable to him. Gemara says you can't say that either because it's Maram Rabbi Yochanan halachi benazir. The fact that a son can take the father's sacrifices and offer them, that's also a halacha by halacha l'Moshe Sinai, an oral tradition for Nazir. So now we have two oral traditions by Nazir. One that a father can make his son into a Nazir, and also that the son can bring his father's sacrifices. So we have two of them. Okay, so that can't be what's coming from the psukim of Daber al Bnei Yisrael. If so, Ishkiyafli Nederbercha Be'erchen Lamali. Maybe the Ihachi is not supposed to be here. Do you have an Ihachi in your Gemara? Huh? What do you have? And what is there any note there? Because I have an aleph.
Yeah.
I have a brackets, and it doesn't go to anything on the side.
This expression, which connects the forthcoming discussion with the preceding one, seems out of place, since the coming discussion is independent of the foregoing.
Now, who are they quoting from?
Although Rush and Shita and Chachmei keep this text, parents and Agos suggested people.
Yeah, they forgot to put the Haggai Sagra on my page. But they still have the note that goes to the Haggai Sagra. They missed it. They didn't put it in here. Taf Aleph Mem, Tevas Elu Machuka, or Machuk. These words are erased. You have the Haggai Sagra.
Everything is electronic.
Amazing.
That's why I just spent $100 to update this.
To what?
If
To
you're
update
wondering
it?
what I was doing, I said update, but it was $100. I updated everything.
Oh. Wow. Okay.
It was a costly share.
Okay. The new Gemara. New Gemara, according to the Gra and according to this, the new Gemara. It goes like this. Ishki Yafli Neder Be'erkacha. We're quoting the pasuk that when a person will express clearly, Ishki Yafli will clearly express, is that the translation?
Really utter a vow.
Utter a vow of donation. Be'erechen, when it says this by Erechen Lamali, why does it need to say Ishki Yafli by Erechen? Michti. Let's see. Iskish Erechen Lenadarim. It says the same. We have a comparison of Erechen to Nadarim. Erechen is when he takes the vow that he's going to give money to the temple based on a person's age, and Nadarim is any sort of vow. Damar Kra Ishki Yafli Neder Berkacha Vatanya Gabin Nadarim Ish Mata Lemele Ish. What's the aleph over here? Okay, you have to drop one of the ishes. It says ish twice. The rabbi says, look, by Erechen it says, Ishki Yafli Neder Berkacha. So it uses the expression of a man that will take this vow. By Nedarim, it also says a man will take a vow. Now, when it says a man will take a vow, by Nedarim, it's coming to include a non-Jew as well. That a non-Jew can take a vow that is a pledge that he's going to bring a sacrifice. And a non-Jew actually can bring a sacrifice. He can't bring certain sacrifices, but a regular neder or nedava, a regular donation sacrifice he's allowed to bring. So if it says that a non-Jew can bring the sacrifice, and I compare nedarim to erechen, so why does it have to say it again by erechen ish? You already have the comparison to nedarim, and then by nedarim it says ish. That should be enough. Erechen is pledging the value based on
valuation.
valuation based on a person's
s-
age.
For slave.
No. Or if someone says, I want to give a donation to the temple, I'm going to give the value of so and so. You have to go and check how old that person is. And then based on
Is it
that,
always based off of a person's value, or that's just a
no, it's just
circumstance
one of the
that-
ways that you can do it.
That's the same error can also use for wind damage and other damage.
No, that's different.
That's a different.
Yeah.
error.
Yeah, this is called, what he do is he says, Erech Pliny Alai. The value of so-and-so is upon me as an obligation. We did Erechin. We learned Erech. Okay. Yeah, we're approaching almost our fifth year over here.
Fifth year.
I gotta get it to you.
So, ish kiyafli berchen lamali. It's funny. The Gemara repeats the question here. And very interesting. Usually the Gemara is more careful. It shortens the language. You have to fill in a lot. Over here, it like spells it out. Ella hai ish mi boile lasuy muflash samach leish. Coming to teach me something interesting. Your phone's like the Stein. Okay. It's coming to teach me that a person can take a vow even though he's not bar mitzvah. Follow? Even though he's not bar mitzvah, he can take the vow. How old does he have to be? Samach lesh. Close to bar mitzvah, even when he's 12 years old. That we learned
So-
from Mufla.
But the onus, the repercussion goes to the father or something like that. He's responsible for the child.
Oh, I don't think so. I think at this point, even he becomes responsible
We
just
went over
for
this, I
one.
think, but,
yeah.
Nedarim, we spoke
Right,
all
but I
about, like,
think
why.
it's not a din in chinuch. I think he actually has an obligation when he's 12 years old.
No, 12.
Yeah.
Okay. But
Right,
10-year-old.
not a 10-year-old. No, and only 1 year before. So what we're learning now is why does it have to say by Erechin? Why does he have to say by Erechin Ishki Yafli? It's coming to teach me that even if he's not bar mitzvah, even if he is a year before bar mitzvah, he still would have to pay that pledge. If you say that it's a year before bar mitzvah is a biblical law when it comes to Nedarim or Erechin, then great. But according to the other opinion that says that the vows that a person takes when he's 12 is only rabbinic. So what are you learning from Yishki Yafli? We say La Suye Mufla Samach Lish David Kechavim. Unbelievable. We're talking about in the opinion that says that a bar mitzvah boy midairaisa can take a vow that he's going to give a value to the temple. Under bar mitzvah, it's only rabbinic.
Right.
Comes along the pasuk and tells me, I know that it's only rabbinic for a Jew, but for a non-Jew, it's biblical. That's how we're getting Ishki Yafli to teach me something, even though we already know that rule is only rabbinic. So how's it teaching me Ishki Yafli that it's a year before?
A minor Gentile.
A minor Gentile it would be deraisa, even though a Jew that's a minor would only be derabbanan. It sounds like it's counterintuitive that the non-Jew should have a stricter rule more than the Jew.
I don't know where they got that.
Well, the Gemara is trying to get what is this pasuk teaching me?
I mean,
And
each
since it
will
can't
apply
learn-
to both.
No, because we already said that there's one opinion that holds that Ishki Yafli, that a
Oh.
12-year-old is only rabbinic.
Yeah, because Gentile doesn't have this concept of bar and bas mitzvah.
Very good. Very good. That's Jonathan is saying. Maybe the pshat is that a Gentile doesn't have the concept of bar and bas mitzvah. So that's why by him it could be biblical. But then I have a question again. Why is it only 1 year? Maybe there's nothing to do. It sounds like there's a concept of bar mitzvah and he's going a year before. No? We have this question. When a non-Jew converts, their child, they have a special status called a ger katan. Convert together with their family. There's a special status. They can actually reject it when they're older. their bar mitzvah, they can say that I don't want it anymore. They can reject it. Bas mitzvah. Yeah, but by a boy as well, same thing. So anyway, what happens if there's a boy or a girl that's already reached maturity, but they're not bar and bas mitzvah? They're mature just because they're mature, their mind is mature. So when it comes to a Jewish person, so I have the rules of bar and bas mitzvah, who's considered a minor when they're underage. But by a non-Jew, who says that those rules apply? Maybe the rules of bar and bas mitzvah only apply to a Jew. By a non-Jew, it has to do with maturity. So it could be that then they don't have a chance to ask them because they were mature when they went to the mikveh, even though I know that they were 10 years old. But maybe
so it's maturity that applies to a boy.
it sounds like it's just maturity.
And that's just the
Person's intellect. Well, so over here it comes out the opposite. Over here it comes out that I'm looking for a bar mitzvah non-Jew boy that's a bar mitzvah, and 1 year before these laws will apply. Right? So this works out well according to the one that says according to the opinion that says that a Jewish person is allowed to be the one that's being were you able to switch it?
I couldn't understand why I'm not here.
Yeah, we were listening to it.
You didn't hear anything.
So if we say, we have this, it says B'nai Yisrael and it says Ish Bayarchem. So the way we were learning it is that only a Jewish person can take the pledge, but a non-Jewish person can be the one that's pledged. His value could be pledged. That's what we were learning. Now the Gemara is saying the opposite. Let's say there's two opinions. One opinion says it's exactly the opposite, that a Jewish person can be the one that's pledged. You can't pledge the value of a non-Jew, but you can pledge the value of the Jew. But who can do that pledge? Even a non-Jew can do the pledge, but only the pledge of a Jew. So if we say that B'nai Yisrael nerachan v'einav v'cham nerachan, a non-Jew can't be pledged, but maybe they can't take the pledge, that a non-Jew can take the pledge, so shapir, then we understand what we just said. Because Ish Kiyafli is telling me that if a non-Jew takes the pledge when they're 12 years old, that it's going to be a valid pledge because you said a non-Jew can take the pledge. But if you say that a Jewish person can take the pledge, exactly the opposite. A non-Jew can't take the pledge, but who can be pledged? That's all. No, if you say that, a non-Jew can't take it, but who can be pledged? That could be anyone. That even a non-Jew can be pledged. So what are you telling me that the non-Jew needs to be at least 12 years old? That's not true. So kiyafli lamali. What do I need kiyafli? Let me explain that one more time. Okay, we're asking, what do I need the pasuk of ish kiyafli by Erechin? Ish kiyafli tells me when a man will express a vow. Since it's compared to Nedarim, and by Nedarim it says Ish Kiyafli. So why does it have to say it again by Erechin? Any halacha that you're going to get about this, you already said by Nedarim. So we wanted to say is that it's coming to teach me that he doesn't need to be 12, he doesn't need to be bar mitzvah to take this pledge. He can even take the pledge before bar mitzvah. So we said, that's machlokes. One opinion holds that that's only rabbinic. So we answered, we're talking about a non-Jew taking the pledge before his bar mitzvah. I don't know what you call a non-Jew's bar mitzvah, but a year before his bar mitzvah, he becomes muflish samachlish, and he's able to take this pledge. So we said, 1 second.
Kiyafli is
Not, kiyafli means to express clearly a vow. Now, not everyone holds that a non-Jew can pledge Erechin. There's one opinion that holds that a non-Jew cannot pledge Erechin A non-Jew is only allowed to be the one that's being pledged. The value of so-and-so, who's that so-and-so? You know,
He can be pledged.
Mr. Kellogg's, I don't know. Some non-Jew is the one that is able to be pledged. The value of Mr. Kellogg's, that's based on his age. That's going to be, so one second, Mr. Smith. So the problem is that you're now looking for an age for the non-Jew that you're going to pledge. What's the minimal age that you can pledge? He said muflas amachlish, that he has to be 12 years old. Says that's totally not true. When it comes to pledging someone, even a child had a value. Even a baby had a value of, okay, so we're lost. So kiafli lamali, according to this opinion, right? What do you do with kiafli? Amar Ravada Baraba. Ravada Baraba says, la'asiyev kechavim gadol. Very interesting. The afagav, the gadol huv, eni yedeya lahafles. Okay. It's missing a word im. Im eni yedeya lahafles. See, by a Jewish person, it works like this. A Jewish person takes a pledge from bar mitzvah on, he has to pay it. Does he have to pay it for a year before bar mitzvah? So we say that that's a machlokes. Could be that he does. It could be it's biblical, could be it's rabbinic. If he's over bar mitzvah, do you have to ask him any questions to see if he knows in front of whom he's just pledged? Does he understand that he took a vow to God? We don't have to ask him that if he's over bar mitzvah. Before bar mitzvah, you have to ask him that question.
What is he?
He's pledging someone's value to the temple.
Yeah. So when someone gives an arach, right, is that considered a neder?
Yeah, it's a type of neder. So now, you have to ask him, do you understand what you just said? So, okay. Let's say by a non-Jew, a non-Jew could take a vow, and there's some part of erechin that he can do. It's either he could be pledged or pledge. If he can, yeah. So now what we're saying is, let's say there's a non-Jew that he doesn't know in front of, he doesn't understand what he just said, but he took a pledge. So if it would be a Jew, if he's over bar mitzvah, if it would be a Jew, well, he has to pay it. It doesn't matter if he understood or not, because he only asked the questions before bar mitzvah, when he's 12, in between 12 and 13. If he's over bar mitzvah, then it's automatic. Every Jewish person that takes a vow, the vow is standing.
But
so
you said intellect applies to.
But intellect applies to the non-Jew. So now the question is, now what we're saying is, let's say there's a non-Jew that doesn't have the intellect, and he's over bar mitzvah. Maybe he's underdeveloped, right? Intellectually. He's he's over 13. He's considered he's a gadol. The Gemara is using that term here. But he doesn't have the intellect. So what we're saying is that we're coming to include his vow as well. We're going to exclude his vow. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to exclude his vow. That's what we're saying. It's missing the word by me, lie. Lie, it's supposed to say. It's missing in my Gemara. A very important word.
There's no repercussion for a boy if he verses on his word makes a net there, because he could just say, oh, like I didn't know what I was saying. To always make that point no matter what. So like I just didn't understand.
Right. So before he takes the vow, you have to ask him questions, and then you can tell that he understood. Okay, now the Gemara says, okay, so you satisfied the ish kiyafli by erechin. Ella kiyafli the kasver rachman gavin naziris family. What about by naziris? It says the same expression, ish kiyafli. What do we learn from that? Michti. Iskis naziris nedarim kiyafli lamali. The same question that you had by erechin, that since erechin is compared to nedarim, it's compared to the vow, right? So too, naziris is compared to the vow. And it says by all three of them, it says ish kiyafli. So if once it says it by Nidarim, I don't need to say it by the other ones. Why does it have to say it by that? So for Erechin, we answered that it's coming to exclude a adult, an underdeveloped non-Jewish adult.
Right.
That his vows, his Erechin don't apply. But why by Naziris does it have to say it? So the Gemara says, "Lasu yadayim shein mechichas." This we had in the beginning of Nidarim, that if someone takes a vow and he doesn't finish the vow off, he doesn't say kainam or something, that it should be forbidden to me. He just uses it as a yad, which means a handle. Now, if the handle is a little bit ambiguous, so there was a question if that's still considered a vow. So we're saying over here, ishkiyafli, that when he expresses, Abaya said, "Lasu yadayim shein mechichas." Because we have a statement, yadayim shein mechichas. If someone takes a vow, but he does it with a handle, that means he doesn't. He intimates that he's taking a vow, but doesn't express it fully. So Abaya Amar Havin Yadayim. Abaya says that's a good vow. Rava Malaya Alay Havi Yadayim. Rava says it's not a good vow. So La Abaya Nicha, for Abaya it makes sense that now we have Ishkiyafli, that this intimation would already be a vow. That's what we're learning for. El Rava Mayikla Meimer. But what does Rava do? Rava says it's not a good vow. El Kiyafli Mi Boile Lekadrab Tarfin. We're going to do Rikiyafli for something that Reb Tarfon said, and this we quoted before. The Tanya learned in the Brisa, Reb Yehuda Mishum Reb Tarfon. Yehuda says in the name of Reb Tarfon, Ein Echen Mehem Nazir L'fi She'ein Nitnel Azir Sel Lafla. What happened is there's two people that took a vow. It says, I'm going to be a Nazir if that's so and so that's coming towards us. The other one says, I'll take a vow if it's not so and so that's coming towards us. So one of them, l'chayra, should be a Nazir. Right? They say, I'm going to be a Nazir if it's so and so. The other one says, I'm going to be a Nazir if it's not so and so. So one of them should be a Nazir. Reb Tarfon says that neither of them are a Nazir because the pasuk says kiyafli, that you have to express it clearly. And since over here it was left open to some, we still have to figure out who it was. So that wasn't a clear expression. That's the case. So he's not a Nazir at all. So according to Rava, we can say that what does Kiyafli teach me by Naziris? It's coming to teach me the rule of Reb Tarfon, that if you don't say it clearly, it's nothing. Hanich Reb Tarfon. That's only good according to Reb Tarfon. Now the Rabbanan Ma'ikla Meima, the Rabbanan didn't hold with that. We had a whole bunch of Gemaras where someone says that he's a Nazir and it wasn't clear, is he not? All of this according to Reb Tarfon, that whole thing wouldn't apply. What about the other opinion according to the Rabbanan? What do we learn from Kiyafli according to Rava? Elami Boile, look at the Tanya, we're going to use it for what we taught in the Brisa, Hetan Adarim Parchin Ba'avir. Vein Lemal Mash Yismachu. Rebelezraim Yesh Lemal Mash Yismachu. Shnemish Kiyafli, Stay Pamim, Ach Echad Afla Leser, Echad Afla Leheter. To annul vows, it doesn't say clearly in the Torah that you can annul a vow. The Gemara calls it Perachas Ba'avir. It's floating in the air. In other words, the source of that is very vague. We don't have the real source. You can go to a Rav and say, can you annul the vow? So comes along our Gemara and says, no, we actually have a source. The source is, it says Ish Kiyafli twice. One is telling me that you express it when you take the vow. The other one is that you express it with charata when you take the vow away. When you want to annul the vow, the Kiyafli tells me that the way of taking it away is when he says why he regrets it. It's teaching me that you can that you can annul a vow. Okay. Chaimer, we start the new Mishnah. Chaimer ba'avadim ibn. Stringency of slaves over women when it comes to Nadarim. Shehu mefer nidre yishtei ve'ena mefer nidre avtei. There's a leniency by a woman, but a slave doesn't have. The husband can annul the wife's naziris. It says Nadarim. I think it's referring to naziris. Right? If a woman becomes a nazir.
A master could annul the slave's vow.
No. We'll see in a second that either he doesn't have to or he can't. Because a slave can't go taking a vow and then tell his master, I took a vow that I'm going to take a day off, so you have to give me a day off or something.
So
you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like, you can't do that. It can, control the,
So a slave can't even make an neder?
can't make a neder. But what happens if he says he's going to be a nazir? Well, if it's going to affect his work, then he has no right to do that. But maybe not affecting the work, he does have the right to do it. So if he's going to say, I'm not going to go to a cemetery, I'm not going to drink wine, maybe that won't affect his work. Maybe he should be allowed to do that. So we say that he can do that. What does the master come along and do? The master can say, no, I want you to drink wine, and he can force him to drink the wine. But what about annulling it? So he has to go to a rav himself to annul it. The master can't annul it. The master can only annul the wife's vow, not the slave's vow.
And the slave's wife, husband, annul her slave wife.
Yeah, I don't know if it's considered a husband
Ah.
by a slave. I don't know if they have that sort of relationship.
Like slaves can't be married.
It could be married, but I don't think it's considered. Like the children, I don't think even go after who's the father of this. I think
She
they just
the
belong to
owner,
the master.
right?
I think so.
At that point, she's still.
I think that's how it works. So the husband, the master can annul his slave's vows. Hafar li'ishtay, hafar ilamis. If he annuls his wife's vow, it's totally annulled. Hafar la'avdai, if he annuls, doesn't actually mean hafar. It means if he protests against it, then yatzel acheres amashlim nazirusay. Now yatzel acheres doesn't mean that he automatically goes free, or it doesn't mean when he goes free. It says when he goes free. Okay. When he goes free, even though the master said, I forbid you from being a nazir, but when he does go free, it pops back on him, and he has to be a nazir. Tanur Rabbanan was taught in the Brisa. Lama Rabbi Kaifel and Naziris Avalayla Nadarim Alerchim. How could the master force him to violate the Naziris, but he can't force him to violate the Nadarim or Erchen? Maishna Gabi Nazir, what's the difference about Nazir that he's able to force him to violate it? The Rachmana, the Eberster says, Lesser Israel Nafshe, Bemisha Nafshi Knuyala, Yatse Avid She Nafshi Knuyala. Because it actually says this by Nadarim, it doesn't even say it by Nazir, but the Gemara quotes it and says, if someone forbids something on his soul, that means only someone that owns his soul. But because the Eved the slave doesn't own his soul, so he can't take that vow. And that's why the master can force him. Yachi Gabi Nadarim Nami. So what are you telling me? You just quoted a pasuk by Nadarim and you tell me that it applies to a Nazir, but it doesn't apply to Nadarim. If you quote it from Nadarim, it applies to Nadarim. Right? That pasuk was said about Nadarim, that he takes an oath on himself. There's a cluster of grapes sitting in front of him. Gabi Nadarim, if he just takes a neder, I'm not going to eat it. He says, I'm not going to eat that cluster. So is he allowed to eat a different cluster? Yeah. So therefore, the master cannot force him to eat it. We'll go feed him another one. He'll eat something else. The master really wants him to eat grapes. We'll go eat another cluster of grapes.
He's not intimating he wants to be a nazir by saying, I don't want to eat.
Well, if he takes a vow that I'm not going to eat the grapes, so the master can't force him because he'll give him another thing of grapes. But Gabi Naziris, by Naziris, the Chimitzar Bahai, it's a the master does have control over him, that if it's not just this individual grape or cluster of grapes, that if he says, I'm never going to eat grapes because he's becoming a Nazir, so then the master can force him to violate it. Gemara says, so basically what you just did was you made the scenario for Nadarim different than Naziris, and then therefore you answered the question. But let's say the scenario is the same. Maybe there only was one cluster of grapes here, and if he doesn't eat it, he's going to get weak, and the master wants him to eat it, and you're going to tell me that the master can't force him? He has control, he can make a neder, he just can't become a nazir. Who does the slave think he is? He can just take a neder that he's not going to eat grapes, and then he's going to be weak, and he won't be able to do a good job. Elamarava, see what that aleph is. Elamarabaya, it's supposed to be that it's not a grape that's there, it's the pits that are there.
Oh.
And the pits don't give energy. If he's taking on a neder, not a nazir, take on a neder, you can't force him because what's the slave going to get from the pits? He's going to get nourishment? Nothing. Grapeseed extract. So Gabi Nazir, the Itzar Nami Bachrini Matzikafli, but if he becomes a Nazir, then the master can force him to violate it because he doesn't want him to be not eating any grapes. When he takes the vow from this grape seeds, he actually can't eat any grapes.
Is this just applying to a goy slave, or
No.
it could also be a Jewish slave?
Yeah. This is talking about, no, it would only be a non-Jewish slave that takes a vow. A non-Jewish slave, yeah, correct.
And a Jewish slave, his master can't
A
force him.
Jewish slave is really a Jew. So it's the same. I'm not sure if the master can force him. One second. The way you answered this question is, what's the difference in Darim and Naziris? Is you made a scenario very different by Nadarim and Naziris, and you said that's why there's a difference. But the whole thing over there is the scenario is different. But let's say you have exactly the same scenario. For example, there's only these grape seeds. There's nothing else to eat. And he says, I'm not going to eat it. So he's going to be weak. He won't be able to do his job. So is the master allowed to force him? You would assume yes, but it says no. So Ella Amar, now it's supposed to be Rava. Ella Amar Rava switches it from the Bach switches it. Lama Rabbi Tzarech Lekvaisel Lenazirusi Vein Tzarech Lekvaisel Lenadarim Vein Tzarech Lekvaisel Leshvuos. Now the question was wrong. It's not why is the master allowed to force him. It's why does the master need to force him? See,
Oh, well,
a
you just said
slave.
why.
A slave can't take a neder anyway. So why? So any neder that a slave takes is never good, because we don't let him take nedarim. Why by Naziris do we let him take Naziris that the master now needs to step in and tell him that he has to violate it? My answer is my time adamakra lara lahetiv. When it comes to taking a vow or taking an oath, it says to do bad or to do good, which means positive or negative. See, a neder is only permissible to take if the only one that's being affected by it is you, for an eved. But because when he takes a neder, he's weakening himself and it's going to affect his master, because the master needs him to work, then the eved can't take that. So we just explained now that why by Naziris can an Eved become a Nazir, but he can't take any other neder, because we have a special pasuk by neder that says that he can only affect himself when he takes a neder, and not he can't affect his master. Okay, let's do the next Mishnah. Over Mikaneged Panav. He runs away from the master, right? He took a vow that he's not going to drink wine. It's going to be a nazir.
Who says that?
The slave, and then he runs away. So Rameir says he's not allowed to drink because it was the master that wanted him to drink. And now that he's de facto not a slave anymore because he ran away, right? So he's not allowed to drink. It was only when he was under the control of the master that he wasn't, but now he ran away. So he's not allowed to drink. The master wanted him to drink the wine. Thinks he's going to get stronger if he drinks wine. Maybe he wanted him to dance. I don't know what type of slave he was. Rabbi Yaisi, Aimer Yeshte. Rabbi Yaisi says that, no, Rameir says La Yeshte because the Nazir says Chal. Rabbi Yaisi says Yeshte, that he's allowed to drink wine because he still is under the jurisdiction of the master, and the master doesn't want him. So wherever he is, he's still under the jurisdiction of the master. Leima b'deshmol kamiflagi. Let's say the machlekes Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yaisi, these are two students of Rabbi Akiva. Let's say that they're arguing about a statement of Shmuel. Amar Shmuel said, "Hamafker avda yatsa l'cheres vein tzarich get shechra." If someone disowns his slave, the slave becomes automatically free. He doesn't become a slave that anyone else can grab. Becomes free automatically.
Someone has to take him back or something.
If someone says,
Master,
if
just,
someone, no,
Have to return.
if he,
No one.
well, that's if he ran away. But if a person disowns him,
No, it's
based on what Shmuel says that if he disowns him, he goes free. Now what we're thinking is like this. Reb Meir is the Shmuel. We're saying that Reb Meir holds of Shmuel because Reb Meir is saying that this person that ran away, even though the master didn't disown him, but it says if he disowned him because de facto, right? It just, the way the situation is, he's not under the master's jurisdiction because he ran away. So he's automatically free, even without a document of manumission.
So the master does not have to make a statement after he's left. Let him just go. In other words,
What we're
he's
saying
gone.
right now is that Reb Meir holds of Shmuel, and running away is the same thing like being disowned. Rabbi Yossi, Leslie the Shmuel. Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold of Shmuel. Running away is not being disowned, therefore he's still under the master's domain. The Gemara says, "Loi, that's not what's going on over here." The Kuli Alma Isli the Shmuel. Everyone holds of what Shmuel says, that if a person disowns his slave, the slave goes free, and he doesn't need a document, the deed of manumission.
Or running away.
Right. Alamanda Mayishte, the one that says that he's allowed to drink. Savar safe mader hadar vasigabe. He's going to return. He thinks that he's going to return, and therefore he's allowed to drink wine, so he doesn't get weak. He says he's not free. He has to come back. But let's impose on him the obligation of a Nazir, so that we'll force him to go back. So that way, because we don't want the slave running away, it belongs to the master. That way, he'll want to drink wine, and he'll say the only way I can drink wine without a guilty conscience is to go back to the master, where the master forces me to drink wine, then I'll be allowed to. So we actually really,
Just to get the master to have wine.
yeah, but that's his only chance. That's his only chance. So that's why we tell him that he's not allowed to drink wine, even though theoretically he should be allowed to drink wine. But we tell him he's not, so that he'll be able, so that he'll want to go back to the master.
But
to be able to drink
ran
wine.
away to drink or not?
No, he ran away. He ran away. The master wants him to drink wine. He took a vow he's not going to drink wine. So Reb Meir says that he's not allowed to drink wine, as if he's free, because he took on under the jurisdiction of the master, he was allowed to drink wine. When he's free, he's not allowed to drink wine. So no, but he, as a free person, he took on himself a vow of Nazirus. It's only as a slave that he can't accept the vow of Nazirus. So if he goes back to being a slave, he'll be able to drink wine. This is a real addict. He'd rather become a slave than drink wine, than to be free and not drink wine. Okay, addictive thinking.
Psych about.
Okay.
Very good.
Shvot tov, everyone.
Taking off now.
Okay.